A ceasefire in name only, the fragile Iran-Israel truce that may already be failing. By Azian Adnan, M.A. At exactly 12 UTC on the 24th June 2025, a fragile ceasefire came into effect between two of the Middle East's most powerful adversaries, Iran and Israel. The world exhaled. Briefly. After 12 days of intense hostilities that pushed the region to the brink of a regional war, U.S. President Donald Trump announced what he described as a phased and reciprocal truce between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the State of Israel. According to the plan, Iran would halt operations first at 00 UTC, with Israel to follow 12 hours later. At face value, the announcement marked a dramatic breakthrough in one of the gravest geopolitical crises of 2025. In reality, however, the ceasefire was barely hours old before accusations of violations began flying, suggesting that the guns may have paused. But the war logic remains dangerously alive. A 12-day descent into chaos. The roots of the conflict lie in the events of 12 June 2025, when Israel reportedly conducted covert airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in Isfahan and Fordow, targeting uranium enrichment sites. Iran's response was swift and direct, launching missiles toward Israeli territory, including Tel Aviv and Haifa, and expanding its response to include U.S. Hanbat military installations in the region. Most notably the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar on the 23rd of June. The death toll rose into the hundreds across both nations, with civilian infrastructure in ruins, oil terminals damaged, and air travel disrupted across the Middle East. The conflict also drew in proxy militias in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, as Hezbollah and Iranian-backed groups fired rockets toward Israeli positions along the northern front. Meanwhile, U.S. forces in Iraq, Bahrain, and Qatar were placed on high alert. Despite repeated calls for restraint from Europe, the Arab League, and the United Nations, the violence only intensified until a sudden announcement from the White House turned the tide. The Trump-brokered ceasefire. Speaking from Camp David, President Trump announced that both Iran and Israel had accepted a truce brokered with the quiet assistance of Qatari negotiators. The agreement would unfold in two phases. Iran would stand down at 0 UTC on the 24th of June, followed by an Israeli ceasefire beginning at 12 UTC. The staggered timing was designed to allow for verification, signaling, and coordination, thus minimizing the risk of misunderstanding in the fog of war. Trump hailed the deal as a triumph of diplomacy over destruction. Today marks the official end to the 12-day war, he declared. We've achieved a complete and total ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Peace is possible. Markets responded positively. Oil prices, which had surged above $110 per barrel amid fears of a regional supply shock, dropped sharply. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange rallied, and Gulf Airlines began planning a resumption of suspended routes. But while the ink on the ceasefire was still wet, cracks were already forming. Ceasefire violated? Conflicting claims surface. Within hours of the ceasefire taking effect, Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant publicly accused Iran of violating the terms by launching additional missiles toward Israeli territory. According to Israeli military sources, missile warning sirens sounded in Beersheba, Dimona, and central Israel just before 13 UTC, barely an hour after the Israeli phase of the truce was supposed to begin. In response, Israel claimed to have launched limited retaliatory strikes on radar and missile infrastructure near Tehran and Bandar Abbas. We will not allow Iran to use diplomacy as cover for continued aggression, Gallant stated, calling the Iranian launch a clear and deliberate breach of the ceasefire. Iranian officials, however, denied the accusations. State broadcaster IRIB said no offensive operations have been conducted since 00 UTC, insisting that Israel was using fabricated provocations to justify continued warmongering. As the mutual recriminations intensified, U.S. military officials expressed concern, but stopped short of confirming either version of events. Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh said the Department of Defense was still evaluating satellite data and intelligence intercepts to determine whether Iran had indeed violated the agreement.
Qatar. The role of Qatar.
Mediator in a minefield. Behind the scenes, the most crucial diplomatic channel in this crisis, has been Qatar. Having previously hosted quiet back-channel talks between the U.S. and Iran during the nuclear negotiations, Doha once again served as an intermediary, leveraging its unique position as a neutral Gulf power with lines open to both Tehran and Washington. According to diplomatic sources, Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani led multiple rounds of indirect talks over 3 days. His efforts were critical in securing Iran's initial consent to pause hostilities and to gain Israel's eventual agreement to the staggered ceasefire framework. Qatar's leadership has since called for strict compliance by all parties and warned that any violation threatens to plunge the region back into confrontation. While Qatar's position as a mediator has been strengthened, its proximity to U.S. military bases has also exposed it to greater risk. Iran's 23rd of June missile strike on Al Udeid, though intercepted, was a stark reminder that no actor remains untouched when regional powers clash. A regional powder keg. The ceasefire's collapse or partial failure carries enormous implications for the broader Middle East. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey have all called for restraint, warning that any renewed fighting could drag the entire region into conflict. Gulf nations are particularly alarmed at the precedent of Iran attacking U.S. bases in Qatar and the prospect of further Israeli retaliation extending into Lebanon or Syria. The United Nations has offered to dispatch ceasefire monitors to both countries, while the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has requested access to Iranian nuclear sites to verify they were not permanently damaged or repurposed for weaponization during the attacks. The European Union, meanwhile, has called for a permanent mechanism for de-escalation, urging the U.S. to revive nuclear talks and encourage regional disarmament dialogues. But with Israeli elections looming and Iranian hardliners emboldened by survival amid bombardment, political will for long-term diplomacy remains limited. Ceasefire or illusion. The tragic truth is that this ceasefire may exist more on paper than in reality. Though fighting has subsided in most sectors, the underlying tensions remain unresolved. Israel views Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat. Iran views Israel as an illegitimate occupier and regional aggressor. Each sees the other as a force that must be deterred or destroyed. For now, the guns are quieter. But if Israel confirms more Iranian launches, or if Iran perceives further airstrikes on its territory, the truce could dissolve within hours. Without independent monitoring or enforcement mechanisms, mutual suspicion may prove fatal. Diplomacy has bought a pause. Whether it can buy peace is a far more difficult question. A heartfelt light. To every soul whose hand did give, you've helped me dream, helped me live. In darkest hours your light came through, with hearts so kind, so pure, so true. Your gifts, like stars in deepest night, have steered me gently toward the light. Each coin, each word, each silent prayer, a thread of hope so rich, so rare. My eyes once dimmed now seek the skies, and slowly clearer visions rise. Because of you, I dare to see the world again, its grace, its plea. Your compassion's flame will not just stay with me alone. It lights the way for others wandering through despair to feel the warmth of selfless care. You've shown what love in action means, in quiet ways through giving scenes. You've built a bridge from soul to soul and made the broken feel more whole. So let this thanks rise like a song, a melody both soft and strong. May your example gently call more hearts to rise to give. To fall into the joy of lifting pain, of planting hope where none remains. Your kindness walks beside me still, a light, a love, a living will.
forget to hit that subscribe button to show your support.